10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Trucks. Welcome, Feth, to the truck. This is Guest Trucks starring Feth.
It's
All right,
me.
Can we do this exactly the same way that we did it last time?
Yeah.
We're here to talk about what we generally refer to in the Trucks Discord as W***D. For reasons
Wind?
of being cute. Yes.
Fucking 420 brew. Haha, blaze it. You know what's up. Haha, fucking haha.
Yes.
Well-
God damn it, Josh. That worked out so well last time. We're here to talk about weed.
I don't know what we're here to talk about regarding weed. Just Feth said, let's talk about weed. And we were like, yeah, okay.
It's my favorite thing to talk about.
I feel like we've done, given that we're all three perusers of weed, as Nan Avedon would say, we haven't talked about it much on the old trucks.
I remember I wanted to do this because I was listening to an old trucks and you guys were talking about weed and Josh was like, I know people sell it in quantities called eighths, and I was like, God, somebody needs to teach you. So
I feel like that's
for
probably
reference,
old Josh now.
Yeah, I know a little bit.
an
about
eighth
that.
is an eighth ounce. Okay, good.
I still couldn't really tell you how much weed that is exactly because my
It's like
sense of
4
measurements is very
grams.
poor.
It's
Yeah,
like
but
4
how much
grams.
is 4 grams? How much is this in
It's
terms
like
of
4
dubs?
little nuggies. God.
How much do
Okay.
I smoke when I
An
smoke?
eighth is 4 nugs.
I just know that I put the green stuff in my pipe, and it brings me closer to God. So
Do you have opinions about strains or quality?
Blue Dream is the best one.
Okay. Is that an indica or a sativa?
I don't fucking know.
okay, so we're all lay people to some extent.
So so
I think it's a hybrid, actually.
That makes sense.
I do enjoy that. So for reference, in terms of our relationships, we should probably just start to talk about our relationships with this drug, why we use it, because we all do, and what it does for us. Mm-hmm. And I will go first, since as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person for whom it is legal for me to do this in the state that I'm living. Although we're all in the same boat on a federal level. I smoked weed only a few times in my life. One time that I smoked weed with Josh, I burned my throat so badly that my voice just randomly stopped working at intervals for like a month or two afterwards.
That can happen, yeah. You were smoking out of my teeny weeny little pipe that just transferred all of the heat into your throat, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know what I was doing. Because I've never been a smoker of anything. I never smoked cigarettes.
I mean, to be clear, like that pipe hits me exactly the same way. I just sort of have learned to deal with it.
What kind of pipe is it? Is it metal?
It's glass, I suppose.
It's
It no longer.
just your standard shitty little glass pipe, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
I think a little smaller than your standard shitty little glass pipe. Honestly, this thing is like no longer than 3 inches long.
Like a
but it's
little baby.
broken now, and I have a bigger one, which is better.
Okay, good.
That's good to hear. So I eat weed generally. I take edibles, and I've found that it is the best sleep drug that I've ever come across. I used to take like the prescription strength Z drugs, the Zolpidems, and so forth that were prescribed to me by the sketchy Russian nurse who I used to get prescription meds from. And they, it's a shame that we couldn't hook you up with her. She might have solved all of your problems a lot faster than you and me solved. But but those work, but they have unpleasant side effects. You don't feel rested afterwards. You don't dream. They lose their effectiveness. They make you groggy. Whereas taking an edible like an hour before bed just helps me sleep, which is not something I've ever encountered with any other kind of thing that I've eaten. And it's not perfect. It doesn't work all the time, but it works better than anything else I've ever tried. And so that's generally what I use it for. Let me pass the baton over to Spam. What is your relationship with the drug?
Well, it definitely doesn't help me sleep. It kind of makes me wired most of the time. I guess I use it to access a sort of aesthetic euphoria for the most part, to watch something or listen to something or just kind of vibe and hang out with my thoughts. I find, that it's a pleasurable experience because it slows my thoughts down a little bit, which is useful for, obvious reasons. But also
So you find it does help with ADD brain a little bit?
In a way. I mean, I wouldn't really call it a treatment for ADD, but it interacts with ADD brain in a way which I like, I guess. It slows the thoughts down and also increases the kind of intensity of each thought, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
It allows me to sort of
easier to grab them as they go past.
Yeah, and pay attention to them and unpack them. Sometimes in ways that aren't helpful, but are at least cool, So yeah, it's nice to have a different relationship with my brain sometimes, I think, is the main thing. And I wasn't really joking when I said it brings me closer to God, but we can talk about that later. Feth, what about you? What's weed for you?
Weed is my constant companion. It really helps with my anxiety. The first time I successfully got high, I was like, wow, I can just focus on one thing at a time and not be concerned about everything that's happening. So it helps with that. It's also helps me sleep, of course. It's just a fun time.
I would say that probably one of the major reasons why it does help me sleep is exactly that. Is because it's good for anxiety. Not all the time. Sometimes it's not good for anxiety. But,
yeah, sometimes it makes you paranoid.
Yeah, I would say the thing that weed does to my brain is that it makes connections between concepts more easy and more powerful. And I'm already inclined to make bullshit connections and, categorize things. But weed does that for me without my even asking to it. And the problem with that is that occasionally it will tell me, okay, think about something awful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to release you from being able to think about something awful for a long time.
Somethingawful.com.
Exactly.
My favorite is when it... My favorite is when I think that the cops are constantly after me. I hear the sirens and I'm like, oh fuck, here we come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get that so much. I just lose the ability to redirect myself sometimes. If I'm having unwelcome or intrusive thoughts, it can make that worse. But it is kind of... But if by the dice roll, it decides to land on something nice, then I don't have to worry about bad thoughts, and that makes me relax and makes it easier for me to go to sleep. So it's kind of a crapshoot, but mostly it works the way that I want it to work.
I have found that being able to sort of redirect the weed brain to where you want it to go is a skill that you can develop, and I think it's possible that developing that skill in weed brain might be helpful for developing it outside of weed brain too.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Feth, I'm curious.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I wanted to ask you how you feel you've managed to cultivate that skill, assuming that you've learned to cultivate.
I guess it's in weed brain. There, as you describe, there's a tendency for it to kind of stick to things and to spiral on those things. And having but the thing about the weed brain is that it's also very easily tricked. So I think eventually I was able to kind of put those two things together, and just kind of be able to say to weed brain, okay, you're doing the thing right now, right? You can tell that you're doing the thing, yeah? So why don't you just kind of put another shiny object in front of it and say, let's focus on this one instead, and weed brain will usually agree to that, at least in my experience. If only
Which
it were so easy.
Which is not a million miles away from cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, pretty much. I find it
therapy.
so much... Yeah, I find it so much easier with weed brain, at least after having gotten to the point where I could do that. But I think that I would like to think that I can adapt this skill into my real life, which still working on it, but you know, you learn what it feels like a little bit, right? And yeah, so I don't know. I think that's another use of weed, is sort of just taking a careful look at your brain from the inside. But Feth, I'm curious if there was any specific aspect of weed that you wanted to discuss today, or if this was pretty much it, just us kind of hanging out and chatting.
I wanted to talk about weed terminology that I know, which I was writing stuff down, and I don't actually know that much, but I know some fun little phrases.
Okay. I could definitely use those, because I do come off as a square among my more serious weed friends.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me share some that I know. So you know about doinks.
I don't know about doinks.
Of course.
Of course.
What's a doink?
You smoke some fat doinks.
Is this just another way of saying a blunt, or
I don't know.
Is any quantity of weed a doink?
I think a doink is a joint.
Yeah,
I think a doink is a joint. That makes sense. It rhymes with joint.
This is all relatively fluid.
It's fucking nice out.
Is it though? Is it fluid? Like, I feel like sometimes when people use these words, they know exactly what they're communicating with them.
Well, maybe Feth can help us with this. What's the difference between a joint and a blunt?
A blunt is made with like cigar paper. A joint is made with like cigarette paper.
Okay.
Easy peasy. There you go.
I've never rolled
Blunts are usually
either of them.
thicker. I'm really bad at rolling joints. I usually just smoke from a pipe or a bong or whatever.
A bong is fun.
And
Have you ever smoked from a bong, Isaac?
I've smoked from a bong once, but I don't think that I actually managed to do it. I smoked from a bong on a hippie vineyard in California that a friend of my girlfriend's had sort of accidentally got sucked into when she married one of their kids and had a kid right out of college. And so she ended up living on this compound in this beautiful handmade house.
Whoa.
Surrounded by all of these grapes and all of this winemaking, stuff where they just turned out bottles upon bottles, just like all their neighbors were presumably doing. And then 10 years later, it all burned down in the wildfires.
Damn.
So that was my one. That was my one bong experience. I cannot tell whether it worked or not. I really did not actually successfully ingest weed into my system until that fateful time on the roof of our apartment when I burned the shit out of my throat.
Yeah, you can tell it's working from the burning. It is with bongs. You really do have to pull hard.
That's why they call it a rip, a bong rip.
That's why. For some reason, that seems intuitive. That rip would mean to breathe in hard.
Mm-hmm. Feth, can you give us some more entertaining weed terminology?
Okay. Do you know what a cherry is?
Sort of.
It's a small fruit.
Okay.
That's like
not that kind of cherry.
Is the cherry like the little bit of the joint that's left at the end that's pretty hard to smoke?
No, that's called a roach. A cherry is whenever you are like lighting up your bowl or whatever, and the little like red part that's on fire, it moves around the bowl. That's called a cherry.
It's the ember.
Yes.
I know it well.
The Dark Souls bonfire of weed.
It tends to get out of hand. That object.
Yeah.
I like that. That's very nice. I went to the weed store the other day, as I'm wont to do, and
just rubbing it in our faces.
I'm sorry. Get some better politicians.
Can you get in trouble as a federal employee for talking about this?
100%. So let's not bandy this around.
We'll anonymize your voice for this episode. That'll work.
Yeah, that'd be really useful. Never have I been more grateful that nobody watches this.
I kind of feel like we shouldn't post it anyway, but I mean,
that might be the paranoia kicking in.
Are you on the ganja weed?
That's certainly a concern that I've had. But anyway, one of their more delightful clerks, and they go through clerks like nobody's business because it's not like, a particularly stable form of employment. What greeted me when I walked in the other day with, "Hey, stoner!" And I thought, well, am I really? Am I a stoner? I mean, I go through a lot of weed, but it's purely for medicinal purposes. I don't know,
I mean,
I don't know if I can lay claim to being a stoner. What constitutes being a stoner, particularly in the context of legal?
That is an interesting distinction, whether one can be a medicinal stoner.
I would assume that anybody who smokes weed is a stoner.
Yeah, who smokes it habitually? I think you could qualify. Isaac.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't know if I have stoner energy though.
No, not so
I feel
much.
like
I wouldn't say
I'm
that.
too angry and mean to be a stoner. I mean, are there angry, mean stoners? I guess there are.
Yes.
It's true, though, you're not the stereotype of a stoner.
I'm thinking of a podcast host who talks about smoking weed all the time. This is James Petrogala of Small Town Murder, who I'm a fan of, and who is one of the most, who basically goes through life in a state of barely restrained rage. But I think that he smokes weed specifically because it helps him not do that. I think that it is a way of treating that kind of that stuff. Like I've noticed recently. Here's the thing that I wanted to talk about weed-wise. It's like as it's starting to become more mainstream, people are going to start to talk more about what kind. Finally, hopefully, be able to actually study. What are the long-term effects of this? What happens when you build up a habit, and when you build up a tolerance. Because we know the stuff stays in your body for a while because you can get busted for it for like a month or two afterwards if you're a heavy smoker. And I occasionally find myself being like, man, my short-term memory is not great. I'm making some mistakes. Is that maybe that's the weed? Maybe I should lay off for a little while to see what happens, and then instantly upon cutting out my normal weed intake, I get way meaner, way angrier, and also stop being able to sleep. And so I'm like, well, maybe at this point I can. I mean, I don't know whether that memory stuff is actually a result of the weed or just a result of me being old and never having a particularly good memory in the first place. But
yeah,
what do you folks notice when you have regular access to it versus when you don't?
Well, when I have it, I smoke it too much. So it does get kind of hard to compare because I'm either smoking every available moment or I'm not smoking at all, as to simplify it. But yeah, the middle ground for me is hard to find. So it is difficult for me to discuss it in that same way. But long term, I've definitely noticed that I am more prone to coughs than I used to be. My lungs are definitely not so thrilled with me.
Have you? I mean, I know it's more difficult in your position than it is in mine, but do consider eating it instead of smoking it, or at least like vaping it. Or
yeah, I've been thinking about learning to kind of sous vide it. Is that the term?
Bring it up to a gentle simmer. Feth, you know the terms. What is the term for sous videing weed?
Fuck shit.
I don't know if there is a term for that.
I think
We could call it. We could coin it right now
memory.
to sous vide.
Like,
Hey.
sous vide, yeah.
So what exactly do you mean by this, Josh?
Just like, my understanding is that the general means of cooking it really stink up your kitchen, and me living with 3 other roommates don't super want to do that. But
Right.
a friend of mine, who you guys know, but who I won't name in this episode, had the idea to sous vide it, and it worked apparently. Just kind of put it in a plastic baggie and boiled it for a while, and then kind of I think she spread it on toast with some Marmite, which sounds fucking amazing. So I might try to duplicate that sometime.
I made firecrackers once, which is like peanut butter crackers with weight in them, and it's
Like
it's
literal
more
firecrackers?
involved than you might think.
No. Peanut
No.
butter crackers with weed.
Oh, got it. That's not even a weed term.
Yeah,
That's just a thing I don't know.
but they didn't really work that well. I've never really like successfully like made my own edibles, I don't think.
Right. So hopefully the time will come when this option is available to anybody, for at least for public health reasons, for Christ's sake. I mean, I could get on you for, smoking too much when you have the weed, but what I really want to get on you about is smoking in general. It's not good for you. We know this. But
Hey, this is
another
a judgment-free
alternative
trucks,
idea.
Isaac.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I suppose it is, but still, I mean, get the chemicals into your body a less destructive way, ideally. And this is why we should
But
legalize
then you
it
can't
for
do
precisely
smoke
this
tricks.
reason. Then you can't do smoke tricks, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Can
I
you
can't do those in the first place, but
I was wondering.
what if I want to learn?
Then do vape tricks instead.
Can we hear another term? Because I
That's
really
not the
like
same.
cherry. I think that's a good one. Roach is good too. What's another along those lines?
Okay. Cached.
Okay,
What's
I know
that?
that one.
Yeah, that one's pretty easy.
No,
when
what's
you're
cash?
when you're cashing out your bowl is when you're there's no more weed left in it. You're done.
Yeah, it's all ash.
Okay.
I know a fair amount of this terminology because of my one-time love of 1960s and 70s comedy albums. You get a lot of weed terminology in old Firesign Theater records and such.
What I like about a lot of these terms is that they're so, like, microscopically focused on, like, the minutia of the experience and the practicalities, but also the aesthetics of it. Like,
Well, it's a ritual, is it not?
it is, but I think this also kind of speaks to the state of mind that weed puts you in, right? Just, you're, like, looking at that little tiny ball of flame sort of disperse itself around the bowl and thinking about ways to control it or to harness it or just to observe it. You see what I'm saying? There's a
So poetic.
yeah, right? Like I think there's a poetic state of mind that this community finds itself in for, reasons mysterious. Maybe they're smoking something.
I mean, it's the burning of incense has been a devotional, practice for many years, and that incense tended to have stuff in it of one kind or another, depending on which discipline that you were a part of. I like. It's sort of interesting the way that, like, when I think about, weed discourse from back in the day, there was a lot of, this is just, stems and seeds and sticks, and, like, because a lot of the weed that was around back in the day was just extremely shitty weed, and a thing that, boomers will tell you is that weed has gotten a lot more potent since they were smoking, and therefore, more dangerous, presumably, question mark.
It's the Grand Canyon, you guys.
It is, gosh.
Oh.
Or at least a series of canyons. I love this particular drive.
Bonk.
But then that sort of discourse has been replaced by artisanal weed discourse, at least around here.
God.
I talked in the Trucks Discord about how, like, this beautiful sort of muraled building was all painted over, and the shop that moved into it was like this, like, Nantucket style bougie weed emporium.
God.
It was like, specializing in East Coast cultivars or something like that. So, that is a problem that will come with legalization, is with microbrew culture springing up around weed culture.
Yeah. It's a little hard to take.
I mean, it is, I guess, cool to know what, strain your weed is.
Yeah.
It was pretty.
I think the benefits probably outweigh the costs, where the benefits are access and decriminalization, and the costs are people being tedious about it.
Yep. Your smoking experience will unlikely to be as James Petrogallo's first smoking experience was a joint laced with dust that somebody's older brother gave you.
One time, my friend was like smoking with her other friend, and she was like, "Oh, I only smoke joints, but they didn't have enough weed for a joint, so they laced it with catnip."
Why? Of all the things, just do tobacco like a normal person.
What's the word for part tobacco part? I know there is a word for it.
Is that a spliff? Is that what a spliff
Spliff,
is?
I think that is a spliff. Yes.
I know one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What's a term I definitely don't know? What's the obscure one?
Well, I'm getting to the end of what I wrote.
Okay.
But,
Come on. Lay it.
do you know what babysitting is?
No.
So it's basically when somebody is like taking their hit in like the rotation and they like hold on to it for a really long time because they're like telling a story or whatever. It's babysitting.
Oh.
It's a call
Have you ever
out.
fucked up the rotation, Josh?
I'm not in that many rotations.
That's a shame.
I'm more of a solo smoker. I'm not super great with weed in social situations.
I feel like I could probably figure it out. I know that you're supposed to pass the doochie on the left-hand side.
Why?
I mean, a lot of the time when I smoke in a circle, it gets fucked up anyway. People like forget what way it's going because we're all high.
Sure.
Like a lot of people just don't care, honestly.
That would be presumably why "don't fuck up the rotation" is a term, because it's such a ever-present
It's a universal
situation.
experience.
Yeah.
To deal with.
Never met.
Which is
anybody
nice that there are
who's
some instructional songs and videos about how you do it properly, so that everybody gets their share. And you're also not supposed, to bogart it. I know that.
Oh yeah,
Bogart?
of course.
Yeah, don't bogart that squishy.
What the fuck?
But that was don't worry, that was only half weed. That was half weed, half Simpsons. But
It's impossible to tell.
Based on Humphrey Bogart, because he used to have a big cigar and would take huge drags on it all the time. So to bogart a joint or a similar item is to like really pull on it as hard as you can, thus taking more than your fair share.
Yeah, that's definitely the habit I've developed, smoking these tiny bowls. I really am kind of a monster hitter, just sort of let's breathe in as much as I can all at once. You mentioned tolerance earlier, and the fact that weed is like way more potent than it was back in the day, and I think my tolerance, like in terms of the 60s, has to be like scary superhuman shit, because my god, the amount that I often have to smoke in order to feel it is ridiculous when you consider how strong it's supposed to be nowadays. It just goes back to those impulse control issues, I guess.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I feel like, yeah, I mean, we've all failed the marshmallow test more than once in our lives, but I feel like anything that you do on a regular basis, you build up a tolerance to, like, things, alcohol, which does not make the underlying effects on your body any better, particularly when you're talking about putting smoke in your lungs. But but the other part of that is like, have we had experiences where we've been too high to be comfortable?
Of course.
Because I've had maybe one or two. It's like, it's not pleasant, because you do lose that last kind of ability to lasso your brain. But it's not, and like I've had a couple of bad nights where I miscalculated that, and sort of ended up bouncing from anxiety to anxiety.
Yeah.
But it's
not that uncommon for me.
Dangerous, in the same way that like drinking to excess can be. You're not likely to go out and hurt yourself. You're likely to just lie on the floor and have a bad time.
Yeah. Maybe send a regrettable text at the worst.
Ooh, I mean, I feel like booze is way more likely to make you send regrettable texts.
Yeah, it's a different kind of regrettable text, It's not like an ill-advised attempt at a booty call like booze might present. It's more of sharing existential horrors with someone who wasn't quite willing to hear them.
I don't think I've ever done that. Beth, have you had what's your most sort of characteristic too much weed experience?
So one time, I was really high and I was texting my friend, and I wanted to watch Osomatsu-san and eat chicken, and I was like, chicken matsu night, and he was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
What the fuck are you talking about?
I haven't really like sent regrettable texts, I don't think, but that just came to mind.
I mean, I feel like potentially veering into complete incomprehensibility is a challenge that Feth would be used to dealing with.
Oh, thanks.
But what? It's not a bad thing. It's one of the most charming features.
Well, thank you.
You have your own language. But I don't know. I feel like when I'm high, I get pretty self-conscious about being high. I mean, that's sort of the stereotype, is like when you're high, you just talk, particularly when you're new
everybody
to it,
knows.
you just talk about being high all the time, or
Sure.
are terrified that people will think you're high or know you're high or something like that. Although that tends to not be the way that I work. But yeah, no, I don't tend to, reach out to people or say weird things when I'm high, just because, I'm more likely to want to lie down and fall asleep.
Yeah. I get it. Oh boy.
Whoops.
Smash. I
You
find
made an error.
it's mostly not so regrettable. It's mostly just like I got high and got on Truck's chat and said a lot of stuff about how bad the new Star Trek is in the spoilers channel.
See, I don't need any kind of drugs to get in the Truck's chat and say regrettable things. That just happens sometimes because I'm an asshole. Maybe if I was high more often, it would happen less. Who knows?
I have no regrets about dumping on the new Star Trek. It's just that nobody seems to care. And maybe I would have a better sense of that if I weren't high.
Aw, everybody. I mean, we all monologue about our special interests in the Trucks chat. That's fine. We're all, Maybe we put this one up unlisted so we can still share it. Keep it on the podcast feed. Maybe that's how we navigate this one.
What are some other aspects of weed?
Yeah, I mean,
what about the first time?
Sorry.
I was gonna ask about the first time you smoked.
Right.
Oh man, it was a long time ago.
So I've shared that like the first time that I think I successfully actually got high was
when you burned your throat.
Was burning my throat on the roof of our apartment. But there were some weed experiences other than that. We crashed with some people in Berkeley who we smoked with, and I think I probably got some weed in me at that point because I got very grumpy immediately and fell asleep. But I remember most of that is that guy showing us his handguns. Which was really the more like I was not expecting this guy to show me his handguns at that point in my life. I had not really had a whole lot of handgun experience, and so that was more concerning to me than the weed at the time. I don't even remember whose friend that guy was. How did we end up in his apartment? Why was I sleeping there? Who knows? It's all a mystery.
It took some searching, but I just remember the first time I smoked. And do you guys find that weed hits really, really different the first time? Like, I was like listening to a guy tell a story, but I realized that I was completely losing track of what he was saying, and in fact, like, I was getting like a kaleidoscope of his face, like as if I was on psychedelics or something.
Yeah.
And, like, his voice was kind of like overlapping upon itself to the point of total incoherence, and like it all shook off the moment someone like addressed me and was like, "Whoa, you're pretty zoned out," right? And I felt the immediate anxiety that people could, that weird weed anxiety that people can tell how high I am. Oh no. Yeah, like, and then later we were like walking somewhere, and there was like this weird sort of, it's very hard to describe, but kind of a a cartoonish outline around people that was sort of licking the air the way flames do.
Yeah.
It never had anything like that ever again since the first time.
I do remember, like, the first couple of times that I got noticeably high, or like that I was sure that I was in fact high. Everything got pretty sparkly. Mm-hmm. I did get some visuals like the first couple of times. And part of that was just me noticing things, because weed does force you to notice things, which is actually one of the best parts about it, I think, is that it makes things that are normally very sufficiently pedestrian that your eyes just slide off them. Your brain loses the ability to distinguish that, which means that you like actually see things around you, which is nice. I distinctly remember walking to the beach with some friends in California and being like, damn, the air is sparkling. That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But no, I haven't experienced that in a while. Although I do get those auras just generally. I think it's just a standard, one of those standard garden variety, like
wizard things.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with that. I was gonna say standard optic nerve fuckery, but let's go with the wizard. How about you, Feth? What was your first time like?
Do you ever get the thing where you're like, so I smoked once. I didn't get high. I was smoking with my brother because I had a friend in high school who would always ask me to cut class and smoke weed with her, and I was like, oh, but I don't want to get high.
But that's
and then I was staying in Austin, and my brother was like, do you want to try weed? And I was like, sure. So I tried it once. I didn't get high. I tried it a second time. We went to get ice cream. I was really high. We were driving home, and I remember the road was kind of wet, and I was showing my brother car seat headrest, and it was just a really nice time. Yeah.
Gosh, chill.
Yeah. They can tell we're all high.
Yeah.
I've never smoked and recorded a trucks. I've made a conscious decision to never do that. What'd you say?
That might be an interesting experiment at some point, but it would probably fuck with the vibe in some intangible way. What were you going to say, Feth, about asking us whether we'd ever experienced such and so?
Oh, I was... because I have psychosis, and I see things sometimes. But I've asked people this before. But, do you ever, look at the road or something, and it looks like it's breathing?
Nope.
No. Okay. Well, sometimes when I'm high, I get that. Sometimes when I'm not high, I get that. I don't know.
I got, well, speaking of drugs, there was one time when I was on mushrooms, and
oh boy.
You do, sort of that I can feel what you mean by the road is breathing, put it that way. What it feels to me like is just sort of the way that our brains make sense of visual information just has so little to do with what is actually happening in the world that it's kind of amazing that we can put together something coherent at the best of times.
Yeah.
And for me it feels like pattern making, because our brains have to pattern make so hard just in order to make sense of everything that's going around us. And on a higher level we pattern make all the time to put language together and put concepts together and all this stuff. Nicely done.
Woohoo!
And so as I said, the closest thing to this would be when I was on mushrooms, and you could see light and stuff resolving itself into patterns, and being like, okay, all of this is moving and working in a way that makes sense on a certain level that I'm not privy to, but it doesn't generally happen to me otherwise. Yeah. Well, that was actually a surprisingly cozy little trucks, I thought.
The moral of today's trucks is that your brain is fascinating, and you should take every opportunity to explore it that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, just try not to break it.
Yeah, don't break it. It's
weed.
Precious.
Smoke weed every day. Smoke weed every day. Every day.
Weed's not going to break it. So
yeah. It might break your lungs.
Yeah, maybe don't smoke anything every day, but you know.
Moral of trucks: don't be a cop.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, no, we're all on the same page on that one. But do also take care of your body if you can.
All right, thanks, Feth. Thanks for teaching me about cherries. I am genuinely grateful about that.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Dudes.
All right, everybody, bye-bye.
All right, bye.